A young woman defied her family's fears to bring breakfast and bandages to a broken veteran sleeping behind a dumpster. When the Hells Angels discovered what she'd done, 50 motorcycles arrived to deliver the kind of debt payment that transforms not just one life, but bridges two worlds that had never understood each other. Zora Paxton left the church community center with 4 containers of scrambled eggs and sausage balanced in her arms. Sunday morning sunlight cut through the oak trees lining 4th Street, warm enough to promise a hot afternoon. The breakfast program had ended an hour ago, but she'd stayed to help clean, packing leftovers while her mother gave instructions about next week's menu. The containers were warm against her forearms. She walked with purpose, her canvas bag bumping against her hip with medical supplies inside, bandages, antiseptic, a tube of antibiotic ointment she'd taken from the nonprofit supply closet. 21 years old, daughter of Reverend Samuel Paxton and schoolteacher Yvonne Paxton, raised in a house where compassion was preached from the pulpit but practiced with careful boundaries. Today, she was crossing one of those boundaries. Behind the grocery store on Maple, tucked between a dumpster and a chain-link fence, she found him exactly where he'd been yesterday. An older man, thin as wire, gray beard matted against his chest, sleeping in a nest of cardboard and a stained sleeping bag. His boots were off, feet wrapped in filthy rags that had once been white. Zora's heart hammered. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "You don't know these people, baby. Street people can be dangerous, unpredictable." But she'd been studying social work for 3 years, volunteering at the Homeless Outreach Center for 2. She knew the statistics, knew that most homeless people were victims, not predators. She approached slowly, staying several feet back. "Sir? Excuse me, sir?" The man's eyes snapped open, pale blue, bloodshot, filled with immediate wariness. He sat up fast, hands raised like he expected an attack. "I ain't bothering nobody. I'll move on." "No, please." Zora held up the containers. "I brought breakfast, and I noticed your feet yesterday. I have some supplies if you'd let me help." His expression hardened. "Don't need charity from church girls playing missionary." His voice was rough, decades of cigarettes and street living ground into every syllable. "Go on home." Zora set the containers on the ground, along with a bottle of water. "I'll leave them here. But I'm a social work student, sir. Those wrappings on your feet, if there's infection, you could lose them. Just think about it." She backed away slowly, returned to the sidewalk. Behind her, she heard him muttering, heard the scrape of cardboard. She didn't look back. The next day, Monday afternoon, she returned. The containers were empty, stacked neatly beside the dumpster. The man was awake this time, sitting with his back against the fence, watching her approach with suspicious eyes. "Brought lunch," she said, staying at a respectful distance. "And more bandages, if you'll let me look at those feet." "Why?" The word came out sharp as broken glass. "Why do you keep coming back here?" "Because nobody should have to live like this." Zora sat down on the curb 15 feet away, opened her own lunch container. "Mind if I eat here?" He stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "Free country." They sat in silence, Zora eating her sandwich, the man watching her like she might transform into something dangerous. After 10 minutes, she packed up her trash, left another container of food and a paper bag with supplies, and walked away. She came back Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Each day, the man said a little more. By Friday, when she approached, he was sitting with the medical supplies open beside him, trying to unwrap his feet with shaking hands. "May I?" Zora asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded. "Name's Howie." "I'm Zora." She moved closer, kneeling in the gravel, and carefully unwrapped the rags. What she saw made her stomach clench. Open sores, angry red infections spreading from untreated wounds. "Howie, you need antibiotics. This is serious." Had worse. But his voice was weaker now, defensive armor cracking. Over the next 2 weeks, Zora came every day. She brought insulin. Howie had finally admitted he was diabetic, smuggled from the nonprofit's medical supplies. She brought food, clean socks, new bandages. She sat and listened as Howie slowly, painfully began to talk. "Had a son," he said one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky orange. "Good kid. Smart. I left when he was 15 after his mama died. He pulled out a photograph, creased and water-stained, a teenage boy standing next to a motorcycle, anger and hurt radiating from his young face. Told myself he was better off without me. Told myself a lot of lies back then. What was his name? Zora asked gently. Jackson. Howie's voice broke. Haven't seen him in 28 years. Probably hates me. Probably should. It's never too late. It is for me. Howie put the photo away. Some bridges burn too hot to ever cross again. The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening. Zora was loading her bag with supplies at home when her mother walked into her room, face tight with barely controlled anger. Her father stood in the doorway behind her. The deacon saw you, Yvonne said. Behind that grocery store with some homeless man. Some biker, they said. Her voice rose. Baby, what are you thinking? I'm thinking he's a human being who needs help. Zora zipped her bag. He's a veteran, Mama. He's diabetic and he's living behind a dumpster. He's dangerous, Samuel said quietly. Those people, bikers, they're involved in drugs, violence. We didn't raise you to put yourself at risk. You raised me to love my neighbor. Zora stood, met her father's eyes. You preach about the Good Samaritan every other month. Well, I found someone beaten down on the side of the road, and I'm not walking past. This stops now, Yvonne said. If you continue seeing this man, you'll live somewhere else. We won't support someone who brings shame on this family. Consorting with criminals. The words hit like ice water. Zora looked between her parents, saw the fear beneath their anger, saw the rigid walls of their world that divided people into safe and dangerous, worthy and unworthy. Then I guess I'll find somewhere else to live. She picked up her bag, walked past her father, down the stairs and out the door. Behind her, her mother's voice cracked. Zora, you come back here right now. But Zora kept walking. Thursday afternoon, she was sitting with Howie, helping him inject his insulin, when she noticed his hands were shaking worse than usual. His skin looked gray, sweaty. Howie, you okay? Just tired, he mumbled, but his eyes weren't focusing right. When did you last check your blood sugar? She grabbed his testing kit, pricked his finger. The meter read 47, dangerously low. Howie, you're hypoglycemic. We need to get you to a hospital. No hospitals. No. His words slurred, eyes rolling back. Zora grabbed her phone, dialed 9111. I need an ambulance at the Maple Street grocery, behind the building. Diabetic emergency. Possible seizure. She stayed on the line, holding Howie's head steady as his body began to convulse. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. The paramedics loaded Howie onto a stretcher while Zora climbed in beside him, holding his hand. At County General, she stayed through the admission process, gave them all the information she knew. A nurse sorting through Howie's belongings held up a worn leather card. He's got an old Hells Angels membership here. Iron Valley chapter, looks like 1985. Zora blinked. She'd known Howie rode motorcycles. The photo of his son proved that, but she hadn't known about club membership. The nurse's cousin was dating someone in a local chapter, she mentioned casually. Word traveled fast through certain networks. By nightfall, that word had reached the right ears. 30 miles away, in a workshop behind an auto restoration business, a man named Forge set down his welding torch and answered his phone. What he heard made his blood run cold, then hot, then cold again. There's an old-timer at County General, his contact said. Used to ride with Iron Valley in the 80s and 90s. Last name's Howard Brennan. Thought your boss might want to know. Forge stood motionless for 10 seconds. Then he walked into the office where Jackson Ironwood Brennan was reviewing invoices. 46 years old, chapter president, owner of Brennan Custom Restoration. A man who'd built a good life, wife, 2 kids, thriving business, while carrying a wound that had never healed. Boss, Forge said quietly, I need you to sit down. Jackson looked up, saw his best friend's face. What happened? There's a man at County General, old member from Iron Valley. Last name Brennan. Forge paused. First name Howard. Jackson's pen clattered to the desk. That's not possible. We've been searching VA databases, homeless networks for 12 years. He's there now. Diabetic crisis. Someone's been taking care of him, kept him alive. Forge pulled out his phone. I'm going to verify before we tell you anything else. But boss, It might be him. The next 3 hours were a blur of phone calls, database checks, photographs exchanged with old members who'd known Howie Brennan in the 90s. By midnight, Forge had confirmation. By 1 a.m., he'd learned about Zora, the young woman who'd defied her family to help a homeless veteran, who'd been visiting daily for 2 weeks, who'd saved his life. By 2 a.m., the entire chapter knew. Jackson sat in his truck in the hospital parking lot at dawn, unable to make himself go inside. 12 years of searching. 12 years of wondering if his father was alive or dead, safe or suffering. 12 years of anger and grief and guilt twisted together. "You don't have to do this alone," Forge said from the passenger seat. "We're here." Behind them, 50 motorcycles filled the lot. Every member who could ride had come, not just for Jackson, but for Howie, one of their own, and for the young woman who'd shown kindness when the world had looked away. Inside, Zora sat beside Howie's bed. He was conscious now, stabilized, hooked to IV that pumped fluid and antibiotics into his thin arms. His eyes were clearer than she'd ever seen them. "You shouldn't have called them," he said, but there was no anger in his voice. "Your parents are going to be so angry. They already are." Zora squeezed his hand. "But you're alive. That's what matters." A nurse appeared at the door. "Miss Paxton, there are some people here to see Mr. Brennan. A lot of people." Zora walked to the waiting room and stopped dead. 50 men and women in leather vests filled the space, silent, massive, their presence transforming the sterile hospital into something else entirely. Security guards stood nervous at the edges, hands on radios. A man stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair shot with gray, eyes the same pale blue as Howie's. He was crying, tears streaming down his weathered face. "You found my father," his voice cracked. "We've been looking for 12 years. You found him." Zora stared at him, recognition clicking into place. "You're Jackson." From the photograph, he broke down then, this massive, intimidating man, sobbing like a child. Zora didn't think, she just moved forward, wrapped her arms around him, held him while he shook with 12 years of grief and hope colliding. "Thank you," Jackson gasped against her shoulder. "Thank you for keeping him alive. Thank you for giving me another chance." Forge stepped forward, older, scarred, voice gentle. "Miss Paxton, my name's Forge. Jackson's VP. We owe you a debt. But first, Jackson needs to see his father. Would you come with us?" They walked through the hospital corridors, this strange procession, young black woman in jeans and a church t-shirt, 50 bikers in leather, nurses and patients pressing against walls to let them pass. At Howie's room, Jackson paused at the door, hand shaking as he reached for the handle. Howie was sitting up, staring at the door like he'd heard them coming. When Jackson walked in, the old man's face crumpled. Jackson, just the name, barely a whisper. "Hey, Dad." Jackson crossed the room in 3 strides, sat on the edge of the bed, took his father's hands. "I've been looking everywhere for you. I didn't think you'd want to be found." Howie was crying now, too. 12 years of isolation breaking apart. "After what I did, leaving you, abandoning you. I was 15 and angry and I said terrible things." Jackson's voice shook. "But you're my father. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped searching." Zora backed toward the door, giving them privacy, but Howie's voice stopped her. "Wait, please." He looked at her, then at Jackson. "This girl, she's been coming every day. Brought food, medicine, sat with me when I didn't deserve it. She saved my life today." His voice broke. "She gave me back my son. How do you repay something like that?" Jackson looked at Zora, really looked at her, young, exhausted, wearing the kind of quiet strength that couldn't be faked. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together." 3 days later, Zora received a message. The chapter wanted to meet with her. Official business. She arrived at County General's Chapel nervous, expecting she didn't know what. The entire chapter was there, along with hospital administrators who looked both confused and impressed. Jackson stood at the front, composed now, though his eyes were still red-rimmed from days of emotion. "Miss Paxton," he said formally, "you showed my father kindness when the world treated him like trash. You defied your family, risked your safety, spent your own money to keep him alive. The Hell's Angels pay their debts, always." Forge stepped forward with a folder. We did some research. You're a graduate student in social work, 21 years old. You work part-time at Mercy Street Outreach. Your student loan debt is $35,000. He paused. It was $35,000. As of this morning, it's zero. Zora's legs went weak. What? We've also secured you a full scholarship for your master's program. A woman named Raven continued. Tuition, books, everything covered. Your parents evicted you, another member, Kodiak, said quietly. We found you a one-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood. First year's rent is paid. And this. Jackson handed her a check. $100,000, endowed to Mercy Street Outreach in your name, specifically for homeless veteran services. Your nonprofit will triple its programs. Zora couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The numbers were impossible, life-changing, more than she'd ever imagined. I didn't do it for money. I didn't do it for rewards. We know. Jackson's voice was gentle. You did it because he was a human being who needed help. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve this. You changed my father's life. You changed mine. Whisper, the youngest member present, stepped forward. There's one more thing. She held out a vest patch, a bridge with sunrise behind it. Honorary member designation, bridge builder. You connected two people who needed each other. That's what we honor most. But there's a deeper gift, Jackson said. My father's going into treatment, medical care, therapy, housing. I'm bringing him home, but his recovery needs a support system, people who care. He met Zora's eyes. You were his family when we couldn't be. We'd like that to continue if you're willing. As family, Zora looked at these 50 intimidating people in leather and chains, saw the tears in their eyes, saw the love and loyalty that bound them together, saw beyond the surface her parents had taught her to fear. I'd be honored, she whispered. The chapel doors burst open. Reverend Samuel Paxton strode in, his wife beside him, both dressed for battle. They froze when they saw the assembled bikers, fear flashing across their faces. Zora, we're taking you home, Yvonne said, voice shaking. Right now. Jackson stepped forward, hands raised peacefully. Reverend Paxton, Mrs. Paxton. My name is Jackson Brennan. I'm the man whose father your daughter saved. Samuel's jaw tightened. We appreciate that, but our daughter doesn't belong. Your daughter practiced what you preach. Jackson interrupted gently. She showed grace, not just with words, but with actions. She risked everything to help a broken man who everyone else ignored. She's the best of what you taught her. Whisper moved forward, older than the rest, gray streaking her dark hair. Reverend, I knew Jackson's mother. Her name was Ruth. She found Christ 6 months before she died. Went to First Baptist on Oak Street. She pulled out an old photograph, a woman in a church dress, smiling. She prayed every day that her son would find his father again. She prayed for reconciliation, for healing. Your daughter was the answer to that prayer. Samuel stared at the photograph. Yvonne was crying silently. I'm not asking you to approve of our lifestyle, Jackson continued. But your daughter built a bridge between two worlds that needed each other. She showed us that compassion doesn't have boundaries. He paused. We'd like to honor that. We'd like to partner with your church, fund a veteran outreach program, combine our resources, actually help people instead of judging them. $100,000, Forge added. Split between your church's programs and the secular nonprofit. We serve together. Samuel looked at his daughter, standing among these leather-clad strangers, holding an honorary vest patch, her face shining with purpose and peace. Baby girl, he said softly, did you really do all this? I just brought breakfast and bandages, Daddy. Zora's voice was steady. They did the rest. No, Howie said from the doorway, leaning on a walker, Jackson supporting him. You saw me when I was invisible. You treated me like I was worth saving when I'd given up on myself. You gave me my son back. His voice broke. You built a bridge out of breakfast and bandages, and now 3 communities are standing on it together. Yvonne crossed the room, took her daughter's hands. I was so afraid. All I saw was the leather and the motorcycles and the danger. I didn't see the people underneath. She looked at Jackson. I'm sorry. Fear makes walls, Jackson said. Your daughter taught us that compassion makes bridges. Samuel extended his hand to Jackson. First Baptist would be honored to partner with you. Let's feed people together. Let's heal people together. The handshake lasted a long moment. Then Samuel pulled his daughter into his arms. "I'm proud of you. Your mama and we're so proud." 6 months passed like morning becoming evening. Zora moved into her apartment, graduated with her bachelor's degree with highest honors. She worked part-time coordinating the church chapter partnership program while pursuing her master's. Every Sunday she had dinner at Jackson's house, with Howie living in the small cottage Jackson had bought him 3 blocks away. Howie was healthy now, diabetes managed, depression treated, body healing from 12 years on the streets. Father and son rebuilt their relationship slowly, carefully, brick by brick. Zora was there for every milestone, every breakthrough, every moment of laughter that healed old wounds. First Baptist hosted weekly breakfasts for homeless veterans now. Chapter members served alongside church volunteers, gruff men in leather working beside elderly church ladies, sharing stories and finding common ground. The dividing lines between communities blurred and faded. Reverend Paxton taught a new class, Breaking Down the Walls We Build. It was standing room only every week. On a warm May afternoon, Zora stood on the university quad in her master's regalia, diploma in hand. The ceremony had ended, graduates dispersing to find their families. She searched the crowd and found them all together, her parents, Howie, Jackson and his wife and kids, 50 chapter members in formal vests, standing beside church deacons and Sunday school teachers. 2 communities that had once feared each other, now celebrating together. Jackson hugged her tight. "The county board called me yesterday. They want to offer you the director position for Veterans Services. Full-time, benefits, budget to actually change things." He grinned. "Your father and I wrote your recommendation letter together." Zora looked at her father, who nodded. "You showed us what real ministry looks like, baby. Time for the whole county to learn." That evening at the celebration party, Zora stood between her father and Jackson, arms linked with both of them. Around them, church members and chapter members mingled, boundaries dissolved by shared purpose. Howie sat nearby, healthy and whole, surrounded by grandchildren who'd only just met him but loved him fiercely. He caught Zora's eye and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Forge appeared at her elbow, raised a glass of punch. "Your old man said something wise earlier. Want to hear it?" "Always. He told me, that girl built a bridge out of breakfast and bandages. And I said, best construction project I ever saw." Forge's eyes were suspiciously bright. "You changed the world, bridge builder. One meal at a time." Zora looked around at the impossible gathering, the communities that shouldn't mix, the people who shouldn't trust each other, the healing that shouldn't have been possible. All of it born from 4 containers of scrambled eggs and a choice to see humanity in a man sleeping behind a dumpster. "I just showed up," she said softly. "That's all it ever takes," Forge replied. "Just showing up when everyone else walks away." Later, as the party wound down and the sun set over the church parking lot where motorcycles and sedans sat side by side, Zora walked Howie to Jackson's truck. The old man moved slowly but steadily. No more shaking hands, no more gray pallor of sickness. "I never thanked you properly," Howie said, stopping to face her. "You saved my life, yes. But more than that, you gave me a reason to be saved. You saw something in me worth fighting for when I couldn't see it myself." "You were always worth it," Zora said. "You just needed someone to believe it first."
"Well..."
Howie smiled, the first real smile she'd ever seen on his weathered face. "You believed, and look what grew from it." They looked back at the church, at the impossible gathering of people who'd learned to build bridges instead of walls, at the communities healing together, at the evidence that compassion practiced with courage could transform everything it touched. Zora drove home alone, through streets she'd walked with containers of food and medical supplies, past the grocery store where she'd first found a broken man behind a dumpster. That space was empty now, chain-link fence casting geometric shadows in the streetlight. She thought about fear and faith, about the walls her parents had built from good intentions and ignorance. Thought about how love required courage, especially when it meant defying the people you loved most. Thought about bridges built from small acts repeated daily, from breakfast and bandages, and showing up when showing up was all you had to offer. In her rearview mirror, she saw the church parking lot lights, saw the silhouettes of people still talking, still laughing, still learning how to be family across lines they'd drawn in fear. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simple kindness extended to someone the world has written off. Sometimes salvation comes not from grand gestures but from scrambled eggs and antiseptic ointment and sitting on a curb with someone everyone else walks past. Sometimes the bridge between two worlds is a 21-year-old woman with a canvas bag and courage enough to build it, one meal at a time. If you have enjoyed the story, tell YouTube to send you more stories like this by subscribing to this channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment.